You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 550, Equinox.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we examine an episode of Star Trek, picking it apart for the morals, meanings, and messages, and seeing if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Equinox, the one where Voyager encounters another Starfleet ship lost in the Delta Quadrant. And if you thought Voyager had it rough, well, wait until you get to know the crew of the Equinox.
Norman Lau, welcome back.
Glad to be back.
I'm glad to have you back. Now, for our listeners who are just catching up with us, you have been, I guess best way to put it, medical leave for the last few months, and we've had a slew of guest hosts, but you stepped in and you said that you were feeling well enough to join us for the next couple of shows, so I'm so glad that we have you here, and our audience gets to hear in your very own words how you're doing.
Much better now. Obviously, I've been gone for some time. I think I stopped recording Mission Log proper somewhere around mid-May of this year being 2024 for those of you who are listening to this 3 years from now. Right, so it's been quite a trial, but I've been able to get through it with obviously the love and support of everyone here, our Mission Log listeners, our Patreon supporters. Obviously, I could not have gotten through it without Carol, my wife Carol, or actually now my fiance.
There we go.
Yeah, but I mean, we've been together for 23 years, so it might as well be that knot has been well tied. And of course, obviously the support with everyone here at Mission Log. And I couldn't thank you, Eugene, Earl, everyone at Mission Log. I could not thank you more for keeping the seat warm for me. And special thanks to everyone who said, sitting in, my chair every single time someone guest starred on the show, because it was humbling and flattering to hear so many, not just guest voices, but celebrity voices as well. And I thank you for all of that. That lifted my spirits quite a bit.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, it has been a thrill to welcome some new and surprise voices to join us in the conversation. But at the same time, want to make it very clear that that co-host seat is yours. And, it's there for you when you are well and, like today, can join us and come back. And I look forward to recording many, many more with you in the future. And just stay tuned, pay attention to our socials and elsewhere, because we'll be announcing other upcoming guests, and you never know who you might hear, including Norman Lau.
Here.
There you go. Now, before we get into the rest of the show formally, a couple of production notes here. Every now and then on Mission Log, we cover a two-parter in 2 podcast episodes. I'd say there's a lot of them that we cover as singular episodes, because we find that thematically, the morals, meanings, messages, they really just fit as one episode. We talked about it. Equinox and Equinox Part 2 felt like an episode or 2 episodes that needed to be treated separately as podcasts. So that's what we're doing here. So we hope that you enjoy that little adjustment to what we normally do. Again, it really just depends on the episode. And because it is sort of a reunion for the whole Mission Log family, we also hope that you enjoy that our very own Earl Green will be providing the recaps for both of these episodes. So I love it that we get to have kind of the core family here to do these episodes together. All right, Norman, if you want to tell people where to reach us, then I can get to trivia.
When I was reading the script, I almost got choked up a bit because I wasn't sure if I was going to read this again. So being able to read this is again, very, very gratifying, and I'm very thankful for saying this for our audience. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find the show at missionlog@roddenberry.com and on X and Facebook at Mission Log Pod. While you're at it, a review and rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform makes a big difference to the podcasts you love. And always remember, your comments could be used on Mission Log. The Roddenberry Industrial Complex will not be denied. That's a little bit new.
That is. It's not going anywhere either. It's staying right there. We have our friends over at The Greatest Generation to thank for that one.
Now, even more importantly, as much as I loved reading that, this is what I really wanted to say again on the air. And now here is John with this week's trivia.
All right. Thank you, my friend. We are diving into Equinox. It is of course, the season 5 of Voyager ender, the cliffhanger before resuming with season 6. We have a story by Brannon Braga, Rick Berman, and Joe Menosky. And here we have the reality of a deadline catching up to the production. Brannon and Joe knew that they wanted a cliffhanger. Of course, Rick Berman, part of that conversation, too. They knew that they wanted a big cliffhanger to end the season. This has been the Star Trek tradition for the most part ever since The Best of Both Worlds. But they didn't know exactly what it would be. Now, the idea got kicked around to have another Starfleet crew stranded in the Delta Quadrant and what possibly had become of them in contrast to Voyager. Now, Joe felt like there wasn't a strong through line at first, but they knew that they had to do something. So fast forward a bit, and then you had the teleplay responsibility handed over to Brannon and Joe specifically, and the writing style was a bit unconventional. Apparently, they went into it with no outline, or at least a lot less of an outline than they would normally have before breaking the first half of a two-parter. But rather, they had some just loose, sketchy ideas, and then they just started to write from scene to scene. So they literally started writing the script from scene to scene before they had a completed outline of the episode. It was directed by David Livingston, and here he is, pretty well protective of his legacy as the most prolific Trek director to date. We have just talked about his episode 1159, and of course, he will be back for more. Now let's talk about our guest stars. We welcome back Scarlett Palmers as Naomi Wildman, and we get to meet members of the Equinox crew. Noah Lessing is played by returning guest star Rick Worthy. This is actually the first time we have seen Rick in his purely human form, though. Go back to DS9, and he was a Klingon. He was Kornan in Soldiers of the Empire, and he was also in the movie Star Trek Insurrection, where he was an Aloran officer. Now, more recently, he wasn't recognizable at all when we caught him completely masked as not one but two different androids in the Voyager second season episode Prototype, and we will catch up with Rick again. As Marla Gilmore, we welcome Olivia Birkeland, making her one and only Star Trek appearance. Now, like a lot of Trek actors, Olivia got her start in live theater. In addition to making the rounds as a TV guest star, she had a recurring role on All My Children, and later appeared in feature films like Far From Heaven and The Bone Collector. Titus Welliver plays Max Burke. Now, at the time of this episode, Titus was a steadily working actor in film, TV, and theater. He already had some features under his belt, and he was a regular on Stephen Bochco's short-lived Brooklyn South. Fast forward a few years, though, and Titus is appearing on Deadwood, and probably his best-known role as the titular Harry Bosch in the HBO series Bosch. Genre roles also fill out his resume with appearances anywhere from Transformers to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to The Mandalorian. Incidentally, Titus's father was well-known landscape painter Neil Welliver. Like father, like son, Titus has picked up that skill too, and his paintings have their own following of fans.
I just wanted to interject something here, John, about Titus Welliver. Mm-hmm. If you're a fan of collecting, you really need to find a video of his where it basically illustrates that he's probably like funded sideshow collectibles and, you know, those super deluxe toy lines like, to the nth degree. He loves being like a super nerd collector, and it shows. And I think that's awesome because it almost gives you like a little bit more kind of like trust when somebody like this comes into genre fandom.
Right.
So
right.
It's also it's very jealous-inducing. Jealousy-inducing.
That is awesome, though. I really appreciate when you hear about a celebrity who is also a nerd collector like yourself. That's just very cool. And finally, the captain of the Equinox, Rudolph Ransom, is played by John Savage. He's one of those actors who has done it all and done it all very well. The role that put him on the map was in the Academy Award-winning feature for Best Picture in 1979, The Deer Hunter. From there and throughout the 70s and 80s, John easily worked between feature films and Broadway, and then melded the two, starring as Claude in Milos Forman's 1979 film adaptation of Hair. It would be impossible to do justice to John's legendary career here. Titles on his resume range from The Thin Red Line to The Godfather Part 3 to Do the Right Thing. Incidentally, he stepped behind the scenes as assistant production manager to the South Africa unit for Spike Lee's Malcolm X. And we also want to point out that he was reunited with his Equinox guest star, Titus Welliver, during a guest stint on Bosch.
Should it be pronounced Equinox or Equinox? By the end of this episode, I think the answer is definitely Eq.
Prologue. The shields are up. The ship is at red alert. The bridge is filled with smoke. The captain yells to the helm to stay the course. Sparks fly. Shields are failing. This isn't Voyager, by the way, but the USS Equinox under the command of Captain Rudolph Ransom. He and his crew aren't having a good day. Despite the continued assault on their ship, Captain Ransom orders the shields to be lowered and the emitters charged, and orders everyone on the bridge to arm themselves. Company's coming. As the ship's power recharges, portals open in mid-air on the bridge. Ransom takes aim and fires into the first one. More portals open, and his bridge crew follows suit. But for one member of Ransom's crew, this is the end of watch. A portal opens behind them, and something emerges, draining his life force on contact. With one man down, the remaining crew has to cover more of the bridge. More creatures emerge, and the crew of the good ship Equinox is in real trouble. It is a good ship, isn't it? Act 1. Aboard Voyager in Astrometrics, Captain Janeway and Chakotay watch a short, repeated snippet of a distress call from the Federation starship Equinox. Seven picked it up and recorded it, and even though it was transmitted 14 hours earlier, she's able to get a fix on where the Equinox is now. Janeway orders a course change to render aid to the Equinox. Seven is curious about Captain Ransom. Does Janeway know him? Not personally, Janeway says, but he's a renowned exobiologist, and the Equinox is a science ship not designed for a long-haul trip to the Delta Quadrant. Seven admits she's looking forward to meeting another Starfleet crew, all in the name of expanding her frame of reference for humanity, of course. By the time Voyager catches up with the Equinox, Random's smaller ship is in bad shape. The shields are barely hanging on, there are multiple hull breaches, and she's lost warp capability. Janeway hails the Equinox, but before she can even finish the boilerplate introduction, Ransom demands that Voyager extend its shields around his ship and match shield frequencies. While Tuvok works on making those modifications, Seven reports interspatial fissures opening on several decks aboard Voyager, including the bridge. Just then, Tuvok raises the shields covering both Voyager and the Equinox. No more fissures. Ransom doesn't answer a hail. Janeway orders Chakotay to assemble rescue teams. She and Tuvok will beam over to the Equinox immediately. In the Equinox engine room, it's a mess. Steam and sparks flying everywhere. Chakotay, B'Elanna, and Tom have beamed in, but the only members of the Equinox crew they find in engineering are desiccated husks. Sort of like they lost a fight with the same creatures that were attacking the ship's bridge earlier. B'Elanna, tasked with bringing the power back online, is baffled by the modifications she finds to the ship's systems. Continuing the search for survivors, Chakotay finds one, and she's nothing short of amazed to see help arrive wearing a Starfleet uniform. Surely the Equinox crew is comprised of the only human beings in the Delta Quadrant, right? Chakotay admits that until today, he and the crew of Voyager thought the same thing. Another search party, consisting of Seven and Harry Kim, finds another survivor. This is crewman Noah Lessing, trapped under debris, and they have to help him without injuring him further in the process. Searching the crew quarters, Neelix and another Voyager crewman find another member of the Equinox crew wearing Science Division blue, but this man thinks he's under attack and fires on them. They are forced to return fire and stun him. Neelix reports the survivor's condition to Voyager's EMH. On the wrecked bridge, Janeway and Tuvok find bodies have indeed hit the floor. Some of them, such as the crewman attacked earlier by one of the airborne creatures, are virtually unrecognizable as human. But the ship's helmsman is still alive, and so is Captain Ransom, injured and slumped over in the captain's chair. Janeway wakes him and asks who attacked the Equinox. Ransom says he doesn't know, and there was no way to communicate with them. The attacks ramped up over a period of weeks. Ransom is surprised to learn that Voyager didn't come looking for his ship, that they are both stranded in the Delta Quadrant. When Janeway mentions that Voyager was hijacked by the Caretaker, Ransom says his crew met the Caretaker as well. Act 2. At a formal gathering in Voyager's mess hall, a memorial is held for the members of Ransom's crew lost in the latest round of attacks. That leaves Ransom with a crew of less than a dozen. Captain Janeway assigns Harry and B'Elanna to oversee getting the Equinox back into fighting shape, while Seven and Tuvok are to coordinate with Ransom's XO, Lieutenant Maxwell Burke. But Burke wants to coordinate a little with B'Elanna. They're old friends from Starfleet Academy. Okay, maybe they were more than friends back then. Tom Paris goes straight to Yellow Alert, and Burke goes to keep his appointment with Seven and Tuvok. Chakotay runs into Ensign Marla Gilmore, the woman he found aboard the Equinox, and she nervously asks to be taken off of any repair details to her ship. Furthermore, she starts hinting that she'd like to transfer to Voyager altogether, something that Chakotay says her captain might not appreciate. She hesitates to follow Chakotay into a turbolift. The Equinox hasn't had working turbolifts in a while, and in any case, it'd be a terrible place to be trapped with one of those things that pop out of the portals. Gilmore has already come right out and said that she is suffering from PTSD, and this becomes even more apparent when she calls for an emergency stop in the turbolift after thinking she is hearing the high-pitched whine of an interspatial fissure. She'd rather take a Jeffries tube to engineering, thank you very much. Chakotay goes with her, saying he could use the exercise. In Astrometrics, Seven reports that Voyager's shields, stretched to cover both ships, are under constant attack by the aliens that attacked Ransom, and the attacks are having a cumulative effect, weakening Voyager's shields over time. The only saving grace is that the aliens are, in Ransom's words, fish out of water, only able to maintain a presence in normal space for seconds at a time. But that's all they need to do an incredible amount of damage. See also why the Equinox crew is down to fewer than a dozen people. Janeway suggests devising a way to trap and contain the creatures. Captivity might reduce their enthusiasm in constantly attacking the Starfleet ships. Lieutenant Burke is way ahead of her. A multi-phasic force field will do the trick, holding one of the creatures for several minutes. There's just one problem. The device that allowed the Equinox to do this was in an area that was flooded with radiation. By the time the radiation has diminished enough to reach it, both ships will be in serious trouble, though Ransom asks Janeway to help him download the schematics from the Equinox. With that, the two captains are off. On the bridge of the Equinox, Janeway and Ransom have a heart-to-heart talk. He lost nearly half his crew within weeks of being pulled into the Delta Quadrant. He has allowed rank and formality to fall by the wayside. He's curious how many times Janeway has had to break the Prime Directive since Voyager arrived here. Janeway says the directive hasn't been broken, but it has been turned into a few balloon animals from time to time. Ransom evasively says he's walked a fine line with the Prime Directive before he literally stumbles across the dedication plaque that normally hangs near the bridge turbolift. Time to restore the name of the good ship Equinox. I mean, it is a good ship, right? Let's put a pin in that. Captain Ransom strides into the mess hall aboard Voyager, finding Lieutenant Burke chowing down on real food and not emergency rations. It's hard to blame him, but Ransom suggests not getting too comfortable with Neelix's cooking. From what he's been able to tell from talking to Janeway, in his words, this crew will never understand. Under his breath, he issues Burke orders to keep the research lab off limits and keep the Equinox's warp core injectors secret. Oh, and one more thing. Don't volunteer too much information to Voyager's crew, including your ex-girlfriend from Starfleet Academy. Act 3. Crewman Noah Lessing catches up with Seven in Voyager's astrometrics area, offering to help her sort through the biodata accumulated by the Equinox crew, when a high-pitched whine cuts off the conversation. Lessing instinctively draws his phaser at the sound. On the bridge, Tuvok reports that portions of Voyager's shields have gone offline, and fissures are forming on several decks, including the bridge. Harry works to reroute extra power to the shields, but just like that, the sound stops, and so do the fissures. Tuvok's a bit worried. The creatures, whatever they are, almost got through by concentrating their efforts on one point in the shields. That indicates tactical thinking and therefore intelligence. Chakotay says that their margin of safety of days instead of hours might have been on the optimistic side. Speaking of tactical thinking, time for a command crew confab. Seven believes that an automatic shield grid system to trap the aliens can be deployed in both ships within 14 hours. Chakotay suggests that maybe it's time to cut the Equinox loose and concentrate both crews aboard Voyager. But Ransom and Burke are adamant about keeping the Equinox in one piece, and Ransom even says that he and his crew are prepared to leave Voyager immediately. Not so fast, Janeway says. She looked up the regs, and in a situation like this, whoever commands the ship with tactical superiority is in charge. Ransom may be a fellow captain, but Janeway is the extra captain-y captain in the present crisis. Ransom argues that these regs were written in the Alpha Quadrant, where there's always Starfleet backup nearby, unless there isn't. Do the regs really apply here in the Delta Quadrant? Why, yes they do, Janeway replies, and thank you for asking. She gives Ransom the opportunity to voluntarily scuttle the Equinox without her having to make a direct order of it. Ransom agrees, asking if he can go grab a few personal items from his ship before leaving it behind. B'Elanna catches Max Burke working at a command console in Voyager Engineering, and he deflects with talk of the good old days. While they chat, his tricorder is connected to the console, downloading the schematics of the automatic defense system Seven devised. In the mess hall, Chakotay and Harry talk to Ensign Gilmore about what can be salvaged from the Equinox, and she too is trying to deflect their attention away from those modified warp core ejectors. Right about the time that Gilmore tries to distract them by describing synaptic stimulators, little gadgets that are like a holodeck for your head, Naomi Wildman, Captain's assistant, shows up to roll out the welcome wagon for Gilmore, who is utterly charmed by the fact that Voyager has at least one child on board, about the same age as her own nephew was before Equinox left Earth. A call from Ransom interrupts, summoning Gilmore to the Equinox bridge. Ransom and his 3 surviving crew members confer, with crewman Lessing pitching the idea of not just leaving the Equinox, but trying to forget everything that happened there. Ransom's not having it. He's disgusted at the thought that any of his crew are ready to abandon their loyalty to him over the opportunity for a shower and a hot meal. And he says Voyager will be fine. The ship and crew are in a much stronger position to defend themselves than the already understaffed Equinox was. Don't worry about them. Plans are afoot, and they are probably not in line with Captain Janeway's orders. In Voyager Astrometrics, Tuvok and Seven are continuing to monitor both ships, and that's when Seven notices that the research lab aboard Equinox, the one that was flooded with radiation, is still flooded with radiation, which should have cleared up by now. They visit Captain Janeway, and Tuvok tells the captain of his suspicions that the radiation flood is intentional, a cover-up to keep Voyager's crew from nosing around in the research lab. But Janeway has the bright idea of sending Voyager's EMH there, since he is immune to radiation poisoning. He can look around, gather whatever evidence is needed, and return to Voyager. The Doctor beams over and is horrified at what he finds. Act 4. Aboard Equinox, Voyager's Doctor has found the multiphasic chamber that was alluded to in the vaguest possible terms by Lieutenant Burke. They've already built one. But there's a lot more to it than that. The short explanation is this. Yes, it does trap the alien creatures that emerge from the fissures, but it also breaks them down into a biomass that stores energy that can be fed into the Equinox's modified engines. In short, Ransom's crew has been trapping and killing these life forms to power their desperate trip home. Back on Voyager, Captain Ransom and Lieutenant Burke are having a hush-hush, walk-and-talk conversation in Voyager's corridors, scheming and plotting to sabotage Voyager's systems and enable them to escape in the Equinox. Then a turbo lift opens and some of Voyager's security officers emerge, phasers drawn. Ransom and Burke backpedal and try to make their way to a transporter room, only to be cut off by Tuvok. It seems Captain Janeway would like to see them. In the briefing room, Janeway lays out the evidence and the accusations. Captain Ransom and his crew have been knowingly, deliberately killing living things to fuel their ship. That, in turn, has made them a target for the rest of the creatures. Ransom tells her of the Equinox crew's encounter with a race called the Ankare, who introduced them to these lifeforms, creatures they saw as harbingers of good luck from another realm. Ransom's crew acquired an Ankare device to summon the creatures, and summon one right into captivity for study. But it reacted badly to captivity, and it died. That's when they found the creature's remains could power the ship and cut time off the trip. By his estimate, they would only need to kill 63 more of the creatures to get to the Alpha Quadrant. Ransom quotes Starfleet regs empowering a captain to use any justifiable means to preserve his ship and crew in a desperate situation. But Janeway says those regs don't justify murder. Starfleet officers are sworn to seek out new life forms, not kill them. Janeway relieves Ransom of command, places him under arrest, and orders the same for his crew. When he pleads for leniency for his crew, claiming they were just following his orders, Janeway simply responds, "Their mistake." Back on the bridge, Captain Janeway orders the Doctor to return to the Equinox lab and gather more data so communications can be established with the aliens. Seven, in the meantime, is to go to the Equinox and dismantle their engine modifications. Chakotay urges Ensign Gilmore to help decrypt the schematic for the Equinox's warp core enhancements, but he finds her claims of remorse less than convincing. Aboard the Equinox, Voyager's Doctor summons the EMH from the Equinox, who is surprised to see another EMH. Voyager's Doctor mentions that the mobile emitter makes this possible, but more to the point, he's horrified when his counterpart from the Equinox reveals that he personally conducted the experiments on the alien lifeforms, and the Equinox crew deleted his ethical subroutines. The same ethical subroutines that would, say, prevent the Equinox Doctor from stealing the mobile emitter and swapping places, operating undercover on Voyager, while Voyager's Doctor is stranded on the Equinox. Okay, so maybe in the future we shouldn't mention the mobile emitter, don't lead with that. Act 5. The shields surrounding Voyager and Equinox are sparking with energy as the alien lifeforms increase their attempts to break through. Tuvok and Seven are ordered to charge the defense system, and Captain Janeway calls sickbay to ask the Doctor for a progress report on opening communications with the aliens. But she is speaking to the Doctor from the Equinox, not the Doctor from Voyager, and he lies through his holographic teeth because this Doctor has sworn an oath to do all the harm. Let's call him the double EMH, Emergency Evil Malpractice Hologram. He pays a house call to Ransom and the remaining Equinox crew who are confined to quarters, and he's brought the cure for what ails them, a medical kit full of phasers. Prescription, jailbreak. When B'Elanna and Tuvok try to activate the automated shielding to hold the aliens at bay, it doesn't work, and it keeps getting worse from there. Voyager shields have been sabotaged, and B'Elanna is losing a cat-and-mouse game of electronic countermeasures with Max Burke. Burke has the upper hand, literally beaming the automated shield generator off of Voyager and into Equinox engineering. Captain Janeway hails Captain Ransom and threatens to fire on the Equinox, but he closes the channel, brushing her off. The Equinox pulls away, leaving Voyager to her fate. On the bridge of Voyager, the ship is at red alert. The bridge is filled with the rising whine of interspatial fissures opening. Shields have failed. Captain Janeway orders everyone on the bridge to arm themselves. Company's coming. She and her crew are not having a good day. To be continued.
All right, thank you, Earl, again, integral part of the Mission Log family, for dropping in this week and next with the recap for Equinox and Equinox Part 2. We really appreciate it. Norman, that leaves us to pick apart the meat on the bones, and I want to start out with kind of my sense of awe at the teaser segment. You just, it's a great writing hack, and it's something that I think Brandon does very well. You start out with the worst possible scenario, and you just go into this short tight segment that is just cinematic, a lot of action, throws you into the middle of it immediately. And my first thought was, are they fighting the macrovirus again? It was so dark, and they were just shooting at things flying around. I was like, what is going on? But it was cool. Yeah.
I liked seeing the action. I liked seeing the ship. I remember seeing the ship for the first time in when Eaglemoss was producing the miniature ships. Very unique type of fuselage and silhouette. So I thought that was very cool. I'm not going to jump into the name of the captain because that's an interesting thing. But I do think that it's like whatever we saw in the prologue is starting to maybe, I don't know, like lean us towards a certain flavor of captain that we're dealing with before we even. So what I'm saying is that it's kind of like leading us down a specific presumption that I'm not exactly sure it's going to turn out the way it's going to turn out, but I think it will.
It's a setup. It is a setup for sure, just to get across as much information as is necessary, and to tease the audience. You know? So yeah, I think it works. All right, you didn't mention the captain's name, Captain Ransom.
Yeah, right. My ears perked up, and I'm not going to jump any timelines, but we know of another Ransom name out there in the milieu of Star Trek, if you will. So stay tuned. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, I thought it very kind of intriguing setup here to have a Federation starship out there in the Delta Quadrant. Although, look, in the episodes, they reference this as the Delta Quadrant, but as we know from our very astute listeners / astute viewers, technically, they're back in the Beta Quadrant at this point because they've gotten all these kind of fast-forward moments, whether it was Kess. Either Kess, sending them ahead 10,000 light years, or using the Borg conduit, all these other things. So they kind of jumped ahead quite a bit, but for the purposes of the show, Delta Quadrant. Yeah. Maybe we should consult our maps of stellar cartography.
Oh, if
Dr.
only we
Nemechek.
knew somebody.
Exactly.
Right, yes.
From a kind of like a real world perspective, something that, I don't know, it's a little bit of an alarm for me, like bells go off when I see 5 names between teleplay and writing credits, 2 of which are shared within the teleplay and writing credits. So I'm wondering if this is just one of those kind of things that warrants too many masters trying to be served in a screenplay / teleplay.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that's not a bad thing to feel. I think if you saw, 20 producers on here the way that you do now, then certainly reason to be worried. But keep in mind, as I try to drive home in the trivia from week to week, there really isn't a single formula for how these get created. And even then, the writer's credits are very misleading because it could just be somebody who walked down the hall and blurted out an idea. Okay, well, now legally, you need to give that person the credit for the quote-unquote story.
Right.
But then you could also, you got a writer's room and you got, I'll say one of those contributors to the next episode, but you have a whole bunch of writers who also get to pitch in their 2 cents. I think it's more interesting that you've got, Rick Berman listed as part of the story here because he's, as executive producer, he's not really somebody who's pitching story ideas. But it could have been one of these moments where he and Brannon or Joe are just sitting down at lunch or whatever, and, how should we end this? Oh, what about there's another ship out there in the Delta Quadrant? Oh, okay. Well, then at that point, guess what? You get a story credit.
Right, because you're going to take that detail, and that detail has some kind of leverage within the narrative, so that obviously you have to be able to give credit to that idea.
Yes. Right. So you never know. But to your point, very often if you see too many names, it's like, oh, okay. Right. Designed by committee is not always the best thing. Interesting that we have a shout out to the Iridians and thinking that they were extinct. I was like, didn't Ransom watch DS9? I mean, they were right. They were right there, Right. And I always appreciate an episode that cranks up the horror a little bit. Just another little bit of Brannon's thumbprint on this one, I think.
When they were salvaging what was left of the Equinox, at least in the beginning, and they were saving crew members, So Harry's about to cut out somebody from behind this bulkhead, with a laser torch or a plasma torch. It was, Officer Lessing. Can't you just beam people out like that?
Thank you. Or beam out the thing that's on top of him, or use like a little tractor beam to get the thing off of him. Now, I will say this. I thought that scene was played well. I like Lessing's... He was so much to a state of shock and trauma that he just can't feel anything. And he's just sort of zoned out. And I thought it was a good way to play that scene. Just that kind of calm at the eye of the storm, Yeah. And interesting call out to the caretaker. Now, that's interesting. We won't get too far into it here, but that raises interesting questions about the timeline of when the Equinox was pulled into the Delta Quadrant and what their path has been like. Where were they deposited? What has their path been compared to Voyager's? And it has only taken them until now to find each other. But yeah, they may have been out there 5+ years as well, like right around the same time that Voyager got out there. B'Elanna, old boyfriend, new hairstyle. I wonder if that was a choice just for this. Okay, well, we're introducing this character who used to be an old boyfriend. Let's give her a little different look. Let's just maybe play with that a little bit, Nickname of BLT. Oh, how long was somebody sitting on that?
I loved it.
You do?
I do. I loved it. Because, I don't know, it's not so much the nickname. It's just the swagger that Titus Welliver's Burke that guy was just swaggering across the room right to her. And it didn't matter if she was surrounded by Tom or Harry or security guards or whatever. He would have walked through everyone just to say, "What's up, BLT?"
Yeah, that's true. I kind of want to go back to what's happening at Equinox because obviously we got this in the teaser. But I love how they keep driving home how much worse it has been for Equinox and that lure of breaking the Prime Directive, and Janeway is like, never. I've come close, and which questionable. But I think that we'll come back to this for sure in the discussion. It's like this overriding question in this first segment here. Is it there but for the grace of God goes Voyager? It's just a matter of circumstance that could have broken anyone because we don't know anything about Ransom before this other than just what Janeway says.
Right. We will definitely get into discussion later on. One of the weird quirks that I found in this meeting, their first meeting between, the captain of the Equinox, first officer, etc., with the bridge crew and Janeway. Burke says, he calls Captain Ransom Rudy, very informally, his first name, very informally. Yeah. And I'd never really, or at least I have not remembered in recent past where, say, Spock would say Jim, to Captain Kirk in a formal, setting. Or even if Riker would call, Jean-Luc, Picard Jean-Luc in front of, again, a formal setting. Or, maybe even Nerys calling, Cisco Ben.
Ben, yeah.
In a formal setting is what I'm saying.
It's so minor, but it says so much.
So much.
And I know that I'll come back to that too, for sure, It's good to see that Lessing is back up on his feet, that he recovered quickly. And I got to say, he's very cool coming into Astrometrics and chatting with Seven. I'm thinking Seven's had all this bad luck dating in the past, and now here's Lessing. Just talk about a guy with swagger.
So
he's got it too.
Are you saying that now he's more than Lessing?
He is. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Waiting for exactly that. That's why you get the big bucks. And back on Equinox, still a mess. And Ransom, obviously hiding something. And I thought it was very clever and so in character that Janeway happened to look up the regulation that puts her in charge.
That was coming up. That was going to happen, right?
Of course it had to. Yeah.
But I do love a good regulation stipulation. So you have Starfleet Regulation 191, Article 14.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta know where the boundaries are, if there are any, or if somebody has precedence. Let's rewind this. So Equinox was taken by the caretaker. Voyager was taken by the caretaker for different reasons and in different spots of the Delta Quadrant. Now they finally meet. There's not so much as a pizza party before they start measuring egos with regulations. Yeah. Instead of like saying, hey, you know what? Let's all jump in the same lifeboat and go together.
Yeah, I know. I thought the same thing as soon as I watched.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Yeah, unless you're Captain Ransom.
I guess so.
I do like this introduction of the bit of tech that they picked up, the poor man's holodeck, which is interesting. It's a little snap-on VR rig, essentially, they get, though somewhat limited, but very convincing when you're in it, as we will learn later. But I also felt bad for the crew of the Equinox. It's like, we get this cool ship, we get to do cool things, but you don't get a holodeck. Just not even a holosuite like Quark has. Like, nope, you got to fight for your own entertainment. Hope an alien comes along with a little snap-on cortical stimulator for you.
I would have liked to have seen like a Club Bromed program in the cortical stimulator. Right?
This is empty.
Exactly.
There's no people in it. It's just the weird kind of like peach-colored columns and palm trees.
Maybe occasional microbe like attacking you or something like that. Just
right. Yeah. There we go. Oh man, poor Gilmore. I just oh my gosh. I think it was interesting that what we get in episode 1 is definitely a setup for her. There's got to be some payoff, but just ready to get out of this mess with Equinox.
Again, like when she says, I think she was talking to, was it Harry and maybe Tom, maybe the two of them? No, they were talking to Chakotay, because I know it was Chakotay's, it was his leadership team that she was on as an engineer. She says, you're the first friendly faces that we've seen. It's like, no, you're the first human Starfleet faces that they've seen.
Right.
That's a big difference as opposed to friendly alien race versus people from our own galaxy, our own organization, people that we know have dated, across these two ships. So that's, I don't know why they didn't make a bigger deal of that.
I know. I guess there's other friendly people in the Delta Quadrant. They could have stopped at the Pleasure Planet after Voyager was there. You never know.
Sure, right?
Yeah.
People selling scarves, make sure that you have your credit chit there. So
that's the best part of being in Starfleet. Is
that's
all
chit with a CHIT, by the way.
Yeah.
CHIT.
Yes. Yeah. All the alien scarves you can handle. You know who doesn't need scarves, though? Now we get the reveal for the weird alien things and leave it to the Doctor to get inside, figure out what shenanigans are happening inside the Equinox. Good use of him. And, of course, I like the reveals we get later about the duplicate EMH. But, that's what he does.
So does the EMH really need a flashlight to see in the dark? We've talked about this before. He's just basically a hologram. So he has that giant, two-beam flashlight.
Yeah,
and then
he is photons.
Right.
So, yeah.
There's no, low light, bright light level conditions where he needs to, f-stop his eyes.
Yeah,
right?
Infrared. Yeah.
Right. So that's just, obviously, they're playing, more to the practicality of it. But, okay, so speaking of practicality, can't Tuvok or Seven just hack Equinox's computers just to figure it out?
I thought about that too, and I thought, well, okay, they have this on such lockdown, and I think Ransom said something about, don't let them near any of this situation. So that could be an offline system. And I also figure, well, you got to give the Doctor something to do. Right. It's just that now we're at the contractual obligation stage.
Okay, so I'll throw down some nerd cred here. So then what are the access codes that Kirk was able to use to hack Reliant and Reliant's prefix numbers?
Yep,
it's certainly shown. Yep. So that's why they exist. So that's
why they exist. Yeah. Big note to myself upon first viewing. They're using alien bodies to power the ship, followed by multiple question marks. I just thought that was so gruesome, horrific, grotesque, and, kind of a quiet golf clap to Voyager for doing something really weird and creepy.
It's very Brannon-ish.
It is. You know? It is. And it puts Ransom and the rest of his crew. Ransom actually has a line like, by any means necessary. And it just kind of puts him in this role as like a Nazi doctor, just getting his crew to do everything that he says. They buy in on it because he's the captain. But it's twisted. And I appreciate the twistedness of it.
There is an interesting justification that I think we'll get to later about, whether or not he had the right to do that. But again, that's later on down the line for discussion.
Yeah.
But there is like a nice scene, kind of like punctuating this, where Gilmore said to Seven in Astrometrics, "You said you wanted to learn more about humanity. I guess we're not exactly prized examples. I'm sorry." And then Seven says, "On the contrary, you've taught me a great deal." That's, I think, a great moment of, wait a second, you're seeing another side to expand your education of actual humanity from Starfleet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was neat.
And it puts into contrast, well, maybe when Janeway is at her best and the rest of the Voyager crew are at their best, it puts into contrast their adherence to their values. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Don't want to spoil it, but yeah. And I just... The more we got to see the creatures from the other realm, I thought, like, wow, they're kind of cute in a way when they're not baring their teeth and aiming for the neck, but they're very pissed off. They have every right to be.
Somebody took their scarf. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. That's exactly it. Interesting idea that you can just delete the ethical subroutines. You can just go in and kind of like a battery, just decide which one to pull out. And it's like, oh, no more ethics, but the personality stays intact.
I thought there was more like, protocol and lockdown and security to the EM. What do I know? Right? It's all of a sudden.
One would hope.
Yeah.
One would hope, because overriding, like, it shouldn't even be part of the ethical subroutine. It should be actually part of the underlying program that defines what the doctor is. Do no harm.
Shouldn't that be like part of his source code?
One would think. Like, you deactivate that, you deactivate the whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
But I will say, this is not the first time we've seen the Doctor playing not the Doctor. And I love it when they let Bob Picardo stretch like this. He's so good anyway, and you could just get away with the EMH as he is. But when you get to take this computer program and say, like, oh, no, now you're going to be the false future version that this other planet imagines him to be. Or in this case, you get to be the Doctor, but without the ethical subroutines. Really good stuff to let him stretch.
There's a little Deus Ex EMH, if you want to use all those Latin whatevers. But also, okay, so this is something I found strange. So you have like the Doctor kind of like run right into security right when all of these things are happening, like the ship's being attacked and security is being breached, etc. And then all of a sudden... security just lets the Doctor in because he says, they have a mutagenic virus. Oh, sure, let them in. Like, where's Baxter? Baxter would never have let that happen, ever.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you, I don't want to skip ahead to our final summation here. Does the episode hold up? Does it not hold up? It just is a very specific thing, the cliffhanger element here. Look, very few cliffhangers hold up to... opening fire on a Borg cube that is being run by Picard Locutus. There aren't that many cliffhangers that are up to that level. This cliffhanger, okay? Not okay? Should have been in a different place? What do you think?
If B'Elanna is a BLT, should Maxwell Burke be a Big Mac? Who is the McRib in this scenario? Is Neelix the Happy Meal?
We'll get right back to Equinox after a word from this week's sponsor, Grado the Uh-Oh. Hey everybody, we'd like to welcome back a sponsor that is something really special for all the parents, kids, and Star Trek fans out there. It's called Grado the Uh-Oh by J.D. Atlas. And trust us, this is a book that you're going to love. In the spirit of Gene Roddenberry's ideals, Grado the Uh-Oh is more than just a fun read. It's a mission to create a better world, just like our favorite Starfleet officers would.
And one thing that's super fun about this book is all the incredible character designs. Let's talk about Grado himself for a second. He's got this head. It's like a cross between a star and a jester's hat. Kind of appropriate. Spoilers. Won't get into why, but
Yeah.
trust me on this. And a ridiculously short cape on his skinny body. I mean, he's just so quirky and memorable, right?
Those are the two perfect words for it, yeah. And then there's Millie. She's got these uniquely pigtailed hairstyles that you just can totally see inspiring some future cosplay. I mean, she's definitely got that iconic look down. And let's not forget Wizzo the kiddo, who may or may not be Millie's alternate reality twin with her superhero helmet and boot thrusters. Yeah, there you go. Just another great cosplay idea.
And we can't leave out Crystal, the stylish goth girl in a Black Widow spider outfit. Definitely a showstopper.
And then you've got No-No's Rose, a flower that's literally shaped like cartoon stink lines, and it smells like them too. And Cuckoo Maru, this crazy mirror contraption that feels like something out of a retro sci-fi dream. A little bit of a Fab Four reference there for you too.
These characters are reminiscent of some of your favorite cartoon icons like Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century or SpongeBob SquarePants. There's that same level of wild, out-there creativity, but with a positive message behind it all.
And that's really what it's all about. And here's the fun part. Grado the Uh-Oh is a book loved by kids and adults. Fun equals a million volts. And that's exactly how it feels when you're reading it. We love the wild rhymes and the wacky adventures of Millie and Grado. It's a bright, high-energy story that's a blast from start to finish.
And there's more to it than just fun. There's a message about standing up to bullies in a positive way. Millie makes a wish to the stars, and Grado shows up with his superpowers, but even he stumbles sometimes. It's Millie who ends up leading the way, showing that you don't need to be a superhero to make a difference. That's the kind of story I love sharing with my kids.
And Earl, I was going to ask you about that because as a father, you must have a little bit of experience of trying to share stories with positive messages for your kids. This book seems right up there with the best of them.
Yeah, and there is kind of a message. I strongly encourage parents to read to their kids, by the way. And there's a lot of studied evidence that is, it's a wonderful experience to begin with, but it also has lasting benefits. But I got something out of this book, too, which is that as much as I want to help my kids through little problems, big problems, whether it's learning to walk without falling, or whether it's standing up to someone who's giving them a hard time. Sometimes if I jump in the middle of that, like a big klutz, kind of like Grado the Uh-Oh, I stand a really good chance of not allowing them to achieve what they could on their own. So there might be something for the grown-ups in this book. So definitely one to read to and with your kids and pick up a little something yourself in the process.
I love that, and it'll test your rhyming skills, too. So you can't miss this one. The book is Grado the Uh-Oh by J.D. Atlas. You can find it at gradotheUhO.com/missionlog. That's Grado, Grato, VTHE, UHOH.com/missionlog.
And hey, when you pick up a copy, leave a review on Amazon or wherever you buy books. Your reviews are super important and really help authors like JD get the word out. Plus, you get to tell the world you attended the school for gifted little ones and twos. That's a little book reference you'll catch when you dive in.
So join Millie and Grado on their wild, colorful adventure, Grado the Uh-Oh by J.D. Atlas. Go check it out. And remember, fun equals a million volts. All right, Norman, Equinox, also known as Equinox Part 1, but it was broadcast as Equinox. We're going to hit home on some of the important discussion topics, the morals, the ethics, the quandaries that are here. And, this may just automatically tie in, the heart of the discussion here just may automatically tie into our final summation, our final morals, meanings, messages. But I feel like the central theme here from Voyager's perspective as the observers of what's going on the Equinox, we are in Voyager's shoes looking at that and asking ourselves how does circumstance compromise morality, moral decision-making, ethical behavior, etc. And in fact, we get this conversation between Ransom and Janeway. Ransom says it's easy to cling to principles when you're standing on a vessel with its bulkheads intact, manned by a crew that's not starving. Fast forward a little bit, Janeway says, if we turn our backs on our principles, we stop being human.
Right. You and I have focused on the very exact same quote.
I'm glad to hear that. See, it is like riding a bike. We don't do a show together for months, and we're taking the same notes, and we don't even know it until we start recording. I don't want to relitigate DS9, but...
And you were going there too? I was going to go there. Wow. Well, I mean,
we're both
does that
going
mean
there.
Does that mean that it's this evident, of...
You know what? If you do what we do and pick apart Star Trek the way that we do, and we do it in series order like we do, it might have been a very different thing if we'd started with Voyager and then went back to DS9. Yeah. But, and keep in mind, okay, we are now, actually I think we're at the very end of concurrent Star Trek on the air for this period. Right? So when we pick up with the next season, we pick up with the start of season 6 and Equinox Part 2, that is now post DS9. So DS9 has had its run, it has had its controversies, it has had its set of writers, and then Voyager set up to be very much in contrast to that. And here we introduce this captain, we introduce Ransom, who gets to act a bit off the rails and make decisions that we very clearly know are immoral. So is Ransom Sisko in this case? Because if people can defend Sisko, can't they also defend Ransom for the same reasons?
That's a very good question. It's exactly what I was thinking of when they brought up the ethical quandary of Janeway saying, once you sacrifice or once you bend... right? Not necessarily break, but once you bend the Starfleet principles, to your whim, then how much further do you go with it? How much more can you justify? And here's the big issue. The big issue is that in the Delta Quadrant, there isn't some type of Starfleet tribunal that will judge your actions based on Starfleet law. So you can quote any kind of regulation that you want to justify how you feel about either bending or breaking said regulation. But then you ask yourself these questions. Okay, so if she's going to condemn Ransom for what Ransom did, even if Ransom's saying, I justified my actions because they were already dead and their whatever energy reserve that was coming out of their corpses, was just, it's justifiable to use that instead of basically waste any part of the animal to survive, right? So if Janeway is going to condemn him for that, then why does she create a biogenetic weapon to destroy as many of species 8472 as possible with an alliance of probably one of the Federation's greatest, if not the greatest enemy to the Federation? That's one, right? So that's just one example of, I can justify it because it is part of my ship's and crew's survival.
Can you... this is really rhetorical, but can you make a case that Janeway is behaving defensively as opposed to Ransom, who in this case, yes, it is revealed that they kind of got backed into a situation, but they made the situation worse constantly, and that was more of a want rather than a need. They want to go home. They want to stop killing these creatures, but now they've just sort of handed themselves over to this cycle. Janeway made a pact with the devil to temporarily solve this problem that she had with 8472, and like you said, created a weapon that wiped out way more of them than probably 8472 would have wiped out of anybody in the Delta Quadrant.
The thing is that she also didn't have to. Chakotay offered her a solution that she didn't care for. And I'm going to get way into that later on. But the thing is that Janeway had a peaceful solution to wait out that particular battle between the Borg and 8472. That's what Chakotay said. Let's go find a planet. Let's shut everything down. Let's hide. Let these titanic powers destroy themselves. It's our hands are clean. We can move on. It may be a little bit longer, but we're going to be completely dissociated with that fight, and we can do so with our morality intact. Even the thing with Ransom's like, we didn't kill it initially. We didn't do it in terms of aggression. It just happened, and then, sure, the cycle started to kind of like perpetuate itself. But at the very beginning, it was just as innocuous as, say, Janeway saying, well, is there a way that we can prevent ourselves from being, attacked by 8472? What's the worst that can happen? Oh, I don't know. Creating basically a weapon of mass destruction that will end an entire species. And I'm going to go even further with this, right? Because if we take the logic of what she says to Ransom, saying that I'm condemning you based on regulations and your Starfleet oath to seek out new life and new civilizations. What was Tuvix? Wasn't Tuvix new life?
He was a new life. Yeah.
It's not the life she chose for the two being Neelix and Tuvok, but it was new life. And why didn't you seek out how to propagate and support that life? So again, going back to, I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong, because I'm saying that if you're going to justify it in one way and condemn somebody in another way, that's straight out hypocrisy.
Yeah, you have to be able to re-examine, right? Because it is hypocritical. Yeah. To me, it's very interesting whatever kind of like social experiment is happening on Equinox, because you have this very forceful, kind of charismatic captain. You have a small crew, but what's happening there really speaks to something rotten at the core. And maybe we're seeing a reflection on that of that on Voyager as well, because you have a very strong captain. You have some crew members who speak up when they can speak up. I feel like this episode in particular is missing, and next episode as well, missing a bit of Tuvok. Because I miss Tuvok as the wise counselor and best friend that Janeway really needs, because I don't think that is served well by Chakotay. But let's turn our eyes to what's happening on Equinox. It made me wonder how hard it is for any one crew member to be able to speak up and stop or attenuate the cycle that is going on there. Ransom says to Janeway about what's happening, they were only following my orders. Janeway cleverly says, their mistake. She's not letting anybody off the hook with what's going on there. But however many it is that's on Equinox, I can't remember if we get an exact crew member, but it's smaller than the 145, 146 that are on Voyager. Nobody is comfortable enough to say stop. Even poor Gilmore, you can tell she's got a conscience, but she won't do anything about it. And it just makes me wonder, is this something that was endemic before they set off on their mission? Is this a bad choice of crew? Or, I think, speaking to the heart of what's going on in the episode, is this just the worst possible circumstances that then force people to I guess it just completely abandoned their principles and morality because, well, okay, maybe I consider my own hands clean. I'm staying out of this particular thing, but I didn't blow the whistle when my captain was doing something incredibly unethical and had the rest of the senior staff in on his scheme as well.
It really depends on like where they kind of adopt the philosophy of what Ransom was doing as being either the only way that they're going to get home, or then eventually turn into some type of unethical, immoral decision-making process. With okay, we're actually killing these aliens. Like that's a fact, right? As opposed to it was a weird experiment that just went our way, and now we're 10,000 light years closer to home. So, and also you have the situation that I guess when they met this alien race for the very first time, like half of their crew was like annihilated. So there's something that's obviously weighing on them psychologically when it comes to we're broken. Like this is a broken ship. And this also adds to like this bigger like moral, an ethical dilemma of having captains that are in Starfleet that aren't prepared to be or we don't see them as captains. Like we see a Picard as a diplomatic captain, or Kirk, Janeway, Archer, like any of these captains are like the flagship captains, right? They're supposed to be able to get themselves out of the situation where they're talking about things, diplomatically and being ambassadors and goodwill, paragons of the Federation. But Ransom isn't that. He was technically, he wasn't even supposed to coin a phrase from Mallrats or Clerks. Like, I wasn't even supposed to be here. I'm not equipped for this. Like, I'm an anthrobiologist or something like that. Archaeologist, something. Right, yeah. That's what Janeway was like. I really admire this guy. This guy has a great scientific brain. But he's not, like, there's a captain and there's a captain. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's the flagship captain and there's a captain that just, I don't know, goes and supervises archaeological digs.
Okay, but is it a step too far to expect that Ransom could say, like, we could just turn around and go back to the Akari. They're the ones who gave us this thing. We can just go back and we can just talk to them. We haven't gotten to all of that yet. But is it too much to say that, like, there is a path that we could try to undo what we did, as opposed to, we made a mistake. I guess we better just keep doing the mistake, because if we, what's the difference in killing once versus killing, 50 times, 100 times, however many times that it takes? And then what do you expect? We don't know much about these aliens anyway. They get back to Earth in theory, and they just you just pinpointed a new place these aliens can show up and not just take out you, but take out the entire planet and everybody around, because now they associate you with them and the murderers of the rest of their species.
I think one of the things that's missing, like in the general narrative, we're not seeing the subtleties, I think, of both sides of the equation. We are seeing Janeway being very staunchly, like, and firmly rooted in morality and Starfleet oath, and rightfully so. I mean, that started off at the very beginning, like, we're not going to get home without our morals and ethics intact. Of course, we have, on occasion, more than probably one, and definitely more than we were comfortable with, of Janeway being hypocritical to that fact. We've seen her bend, quote unquote, the Prime Directive, some flat out break the Prime Directive, because she needs to get her crew home, because she needs to make that choice. I don't think anyone's going to blame her for that from a moral perspective in the grand or final analysis. But we have the luxury of seeing that subtlety in her character arc play out throughout the course of these 5, almost 6 seasons of Voyager. We never saw that with the Equinox. All we see is the summary judgment, because someone, a Janeway, is so repulsed by a captain's decision to get his crew home and the means of getting that crew home, because it's not something that she would do. But she did.
Right.
So that's just, I guess we're going to get probably more into that later, but it's setting up a very dangerous precedent of, again, moral superiority when someone has already been compromised. I'm not sure if this is projection on her part, where she's like, well, he's worse than what I've ever done, but you still did it. Right? So. Yeah. Just to kind of like, I guess, like change momentum here and lighten the mood a little bit. Here's something that I found really, really interesting. Okay, so we're talking about that Equinox and Voyager, and I'm not sure how many other ships, because I haven't gotten that far ahead in Voyager, that have been whisked away by the caretaker around the same time, right? So there's like one thread of Voyager within the Delta Quadrant with all these different alien species that they meet later on, calling Voyager the ship of death. Voyager itself trying to reclaim a lot of its stolen or mismanaged, if you will, technology, from different, markets and bazaars and, all these different places where, the Kazon may have stolen something, which they did, and they would trade it on the black market, etc. And they, Voyager and Janeway, there were a couple episodes talking about, we want to remove as many of these technological fingerprints away from the Delta Quadrant so that no other race gets a foothold or in the power play of being superior because we allowed them to do that. It's kind of like again, breaking the prime directive situation. How is it that in all of the Delta Quadrant, in all the species that they've interacted with, not a single one of them mentioned anything like there's another ship out there? Right?
Right. Well, that's sort of why I want to see a map. I want to see the stellar cartography map because the sensors on these Starfleet ships go for light years beyond. They can detect another ship however far away, right? And you would think that, maybe the caretaker was in one position and then at a different position, either it pulled in, well, we don't know if it pulled in Equinox before or after Voyager. We don't actually get a good grasp on that. The caretaker array that brought in Voyager was destroyed, but we are to believe that there was another caretaker array somewhere, perhaps, possibly.
I think that's right.
I think that is correct. Yeah. So we don't really know a specific timeline. We just have to assume it was around the same time. And it could have been in a totally different direction. They could have been coming at right angles from each other and just happened to converge at this one place. So maybe they found totally different species. It was interesting that Equinox said that they didn't even encounter the Borg. And the Delta Quadrant is just crawling with Borg as far as we know. So, I think it would have been interesting if there had been some tip-off, but then I guess dramatically it's that much bigger of a surprise if it's just like, whoa, what's this ship doing here? Maybe there could have been some reference from a member of the Equinox crew saying like, oh, we ran into the Malon, or we ran into the, and they hate you, or, whatever the case may be.
I thought that would just been an interesting tie-in where all of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, it's like the only reason why we're able to catch up to you is because at this one market, there was like an antimatter, that thing that Neelix left behind. There was like, there was warp plasma, like
right.
in that container,
right.
that we were able to purchase, but they never really said where it came from. It was just there. They're like, well, that's Federation warp plasma technology. Yeah. Like, how is this possible? So, yeah.
Right. That actually would have been very cool.
Before criticizing the regulations written in the Alpha Quadrant, let's ask ourselves how many times any of these ships have been the only ship in the sector.
As somebody who is a far greater orator than I once said, this is not the end. This is not even the beginning of the end. This may be the end of the beginning. And that is where we have found ourselves. We're at the end of the beginning segment of Equinox. You'll be able to join us next week for Equinox Part 2. But we're going to take a pause here to ask ourselves the usual mission log questions. Does the episode hold up? And what did we learn at the end of the day? Is there a moral meaning or a message? A lot going on in this one episode. That's why we broke it up and did not cover these together. So I will start out by posing it to you, Norman. Does Equinox hold up?
I mean, I really enjoyed. I think it holds up for the sheer fact that when I love a fandom, it brings something that I love about any fandom, and that's when you have like your hero character that you establish. In this case, it would be Captain Janeway and her crew, and then you have the situation where a very similar said hero character is compared very directly and the scrutiny is like very on point when it comes to, oh, wait a second. Now that I see these two characters together, Janeway and Ransom, how similar these characters actually are when it comes to whether or not they did something that can be or can't be justified. Because when you have just like a hero character, the hero says, I did it because it was the right thing to do. It was the just thing to do. And maybe history will judge me for that. Mm-hmm. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But that's when you walk away as an audience member saying, okay, they're the hero character. Therefore, I have to be on board with the hero character more often than not, unless it's something so incredibly egregious that you're like, nope, that's not my hero character, and that's not for this particular discussion. We'll get into that in another discussion later on. Do you believe that the character, your hero, is doing the right thing when someone who's very similar does the exact same thing and is less honorable or is seen as being lesser than and dishonorable based on the standards that we've set for our hero characters?
Right.
This is going a long way of saying one question or asking one question. Are there degrees of violating the Prime Directive? So that's where I find this episode holding up, because it really asks something very, very difficult to answer. And I think that it probably, when it first was aired, back in, was this 1998 to now?
99, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it asks that question or poses that question. And I don't think that's a question that can be answered, because what do we know of the Prime Directive that can or can't be stretched, manipulated, bent, and not broken and justified by a character or a hero character like Kirk, Picard, Sisko, and now Janeway, and later captains along the line, where your hero character says, because of the situation that we're in, I justified breaking the Prime Directive, but can explain that away because it was the right thing to do, and we're all safe, and we're all going on to the next mission or the next adventure. Yeah. It didn't jeopardize us. Maybe jeopardized somebody else, but as long as it doesn't jeopardize us, we're okay. Right? So here's the situation. Here's the quote that I found really interesting that makes this episode hold up.
Okay.
So Ransom says, "The Prime Directive, how often have you broken it for the sake of protecting your crew?" And Janeway says, "Broken it? Never. Bent it on occasion. And even then, it was a difficult choice. What about you?" And then Ransom said, "I walked the line once or twice, but nothing serious." So as long as one can justify breaking the Prime Directive as being bent instead of broken, then one can justify one's principles as long as you can sufficiently bend the truth, as long as you have the rank and authority to back up said bending of the truth. Right?
Yeah.
So that's something that I think that happens more and more often in Star Trek, because the times change and the audience changes. They want to see maybe a little bit more reality infused in kind of like the decision-making processes of these paragons of what humanity is supposed to be in the future, this better humanity that Gene wanted. But maybe this is why that someone like a Sisko or Deep Space Nine is so successful, or was so successful from a writing standpoint and a character analysis standpoint, because he's a little bit more real. Yeah. The decisions that you have to make are a little bit darker, because that's still humanity, right? Yeah. Yeah. So in seeing that in this episode, I feel that it holds up because it continues to ask a question that can't be answered and allows us to have that discussion. So that's how I see it. How about you?
Yeah, no, you said a lot and said it very well, and I think I can only follow that up just more from like a production storytelling point of view, which is what I'm looking at here when I assess does it hold up. I think it is produced extremely well. I think this is directed very well. I think David Livingston really knocked it out of the park just with the pacing and mining all the best dramatic bits out of this first half of this story. I appreciate Voyager flipping the script. It is obvious, and it is a bit of that stark contrast that really does knock you over the head. But I think that there is creativity given with the choices here, putting us, the audience, right down in the middle of this fight when we start out with the teaser, and then we get to know this crew a bit. I feel like I already know them. They feel very at home there, even though we have just met them. As an episode as a whole, it feels like we are getting set up for something bigger, which is exactly the job that this episode has to do. It has to get us prepped and ready to see the conclusion, however many months later that the next part of it airs. So all in all, I think it does a very nice job of that just from a slice of entertainment. But as a piece of Star Trek, I think what's interesting is, like you said, it might be too obvious. It might be a bit bonk on the head. But when you see our good captain versus the morally compromised captain, and we have to decide like, oh, wait a minute, but what are the conditions that led him to that? And if those are the conditions that led him there, can the same thing happen to our heroes, a.k.a. us? what happens to us when we are pushed up against a wall and have to make the difficult decisions. And that really dovetails right into morals, meanings, messages, what I picked up here. And I'll just rephrase what I phrased in the last segment. Can we compare this to DS9? I mean, I hate to do it, but I feel like we kind of must. Ben Sisko was faced with an impossible choice, and he compromised his sense of morality and his sense of duty, and then he said he'd do it again. May I remind you that it's easy to be a saint in paradise, right? So what about Ransom? And what about maybe the fragility of Voyager's crew given the same circumstances? Could we see, I'm going to leave Chakotay out of this, could we see a Tuvok, a Harry Kim, a Tom Paris, a B'Elanna Torres, a Seven of Nine getting behind Janeway making some of the same egregious, immoral decisions if it meant getting back home and saving more of the crew than you might lose otherwise? So I think this is a great way to set up these moral conundrums, and again, to do it in this very entertaining way. But we have to ask ourselves, if we're going to let one person off the hook for this kind of behavior, can we also let somebody else off the hook? Norman, what about you?
Well, I'm right in lockstep with you here with this particular moral meaning or message, especially the exploration of it. And I'd like to do a little bit of kind of like role play. We haven't done this in a while.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
And being back, we're going to take these characters and analyze them, for these specific scenes and see if we can come up with an answer to basically the moral meaning or message that I've found in this segment, Starfleet regulations du jour, or perhaps the prime hypocrisy. That's the way that I see it.
Okay, all right.
So, John, dealer's choice. Who would you like to be, Ransom or Janeway?
I'm going to do Garrett Wang doing Janeway.
That is very good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You should do that.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. Here is one scene. And Ransom says to Janeway, "Are you ordering me to abandon my ship?"
I'd rather not have to.
That protocol was written in the Alpha Quadrant. I'm not sure that it makes much sense out here.
The regulation stands.
So I repeat Ransom's quote, that protocol was written in the Alpha Quadrant. I'm not sure that it makes much sense out here. So this is one of these primary issues that maybe you and I have talked about, John, where we have a problem with Janeway's commitment or lack thereof to what is or what isn't actual enforceable Starfleet regulations in the Delta Quadrant. Yeah. Right? In the Alpha Quadrant, yes, again, she can be put up on charges, her logs can be read, the tribunals can be set. That is for them. That is for Starfleet to judge. But then you have the kicker of this complete scene, right? So Ransom says to Janeway, Starfleet Regulation 3, Paragraph 12, in the event of imminent destruction, a captain is authorized to preserve the lives of his crew by any justifiable means.
I doubt that protocol covers mass murder.
In my judgment, it did.
Unacceptable.
So the question needs to be asked. Unacceptable to who? And by any justifiable means, but by whose justification and whose authority? Right? Last time I checked, Janeway and Ransom were wearing the same pips, right? Janeway has only tactically the rank above Ransom based on the previous regulation, but really doesn't have any authority over him. So unless you want to justify what is bending or breaking the violation of the Prime Directive, now you're just splitting hairs, right? Yeah. This is what is, in fact, the litmus test, the authority that says, no, I'm right and you're wrong. To put it bluntly, and I know this is a very polarizing quote, but please forgive me, but I need to make a point. You can't just be a little pregnant.
I know that line, yeah.
Right? Meaning either you have broken the Prime Directive or you haven't.
Right.
Right? So what makes Ransom's survival choices wrong and Janeway's choices, say with 8472, right?
Yeah.
Right? Given that their respective bending, quote unquote, of the Prime Directive is subjective to only their discretion as captains in the Delta Quadrant. Because again, there's no true oversight committee that will judge them on their actions or logs. both of the captains have a legal precedent to act as accordingly to the Starfleet regulations as they see fit. But they're both also choosing the way that they need to get their crews respectively home, based on said bending of said Prime Directive violations.
Right. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Equinox, Part 2.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. I'm losing track of how many hosts we have now. Who was that other guy? The emergency recap hologram? End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.